Hello, everyone, and welcome to the With Chinese Characteristics podcast. I'm Natalie.
I'm Cherry.
And together we talk about topics with Chinese characteristics. And today, Cherry, I have a topic for you.
Okay.
With,
Is it with Chinese characteristics?
well,
Well.
it has two characteristics, I guess.
Okay.
I think this has got more than two. But we're going to talk about, I shouldn't say the Chinese people's African brothers.
Oh, wow.
As they are commonly called in Chinese state media.
Yes. Just brothers, though.
Yeah, no sisters.
No sisters.
Well, you know.
Well, I do see it occasionally. They would add sisters, like after the brothers. They'll say African brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's just the brothers.
People talk about China's moves in Africa over the past decade, and they act like that's a new thing. Like somehow China's suddenly on the world stage and is doing stuff in Africa.
Yeah.
But nothing could be further from the truth. China has been involved in Africa since the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not 1949. Maybe it took a year or two to get over there.
But, since the beginning.
Since the beginning.
Of the People's Republic.
Yes. So this is kind of a new series, which I'll be doing on and off.
A series.
Series, Cherry.
Oh, I didn't. I thought we were only getting one episode.
No, we're going to.
What a treat.
I know, exactly. I aim to please. So we're going to have a whole series, and I'm going to try to talk about every African country that China has been majorly involved with.
Okay.
Since the founding of the PRC.
A long list, I presume.
It's a long list. Africa's a big place.
Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of comrades, supposedly.
Yes, a lot of revolutionary comrades in Africa. A lot of African brothers. Along the way, we'll talk about that term, which is sometimes used kind of possessively. Mm-hmm. It's like our African brothers.
Oh, yeah.
They owe us.
Yes, we're not here to praise the term.
No.
I have very complicated feelings about it, obviously.
Yeah. So, okay, I'll start. So, when most people think of the Cold War, they think of a binary contest for influence. The Communist Soviet Union and its allies on one side, the U.S., NATO, and other capitalist nations on the other, and the rest of the world caught in between. So that's the traditional first world, second world, third world.
Yes.
There was, however, increasingly an additional power, one with its own goals and with its own view of how the future would look. That power, it should be no shock to you, given its importance both historically and today, was China. The People's Republic of China in this case. Far from being a docile ally or vassal of the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China pursued its own aims throughout the Cold War, attempting to outplay both the bear and the eagle.
Yeah.
Nowhere perhaps was this more apparent than in post-colonial Africa. Seen as a blank slate, China, the Soviet Union, and capitalist West all fought for influence and to see Africa develop in their image. In 1955, the Bandung Conference was a large-scale conference of mainly newly independent African and Asian states. So this is only 5 years, basically, after the PRC was founded.
Where's Bandung?
It's in Indonesia.
Okay. So I'm just asking you all sorts of details now. But, who organized the conference?
So it's kind of a group thing. They're like, oh, we should get together. But the two big ones are India and China, because those were two, newly independent states, and they're the big ones in the region.
Yes. Well, China was always independent.
It had stood up, Cherry.
Yeah.
It had stood up.
Liberated.
Yeah. So there have been previous conferences.
Yeah.
Over the past, decade.
Yeah.
But this one was the largest with 29 participants.
Oh, wow.
Though neither the U.S. or the Soviet Union were official attendees, given their status as imperialist powers.
Oh, wow.
So this is an interesting, there's people who view the Soviet Union has never done anything wrong, and they're the global advocates of communism, and they're just trying to help everybody out.
Who are those people?
Angry people on Twitter, I guess. Okay. But
I was going to say, I haven't met any. It doesn't seem to be a very...
Yeah. But even back then, even now, in 1955, a big topic of this conference was like, oh, do we need to condemn the Soviet Union? Because they took all of Eastern Europe. They're holding territory in Asia, that isn't theirs, essentially, that they just grabbed after the war.
Yeah.
So there was a view of them basically being an imperialist power.
Yes.
The U.S., I think, wasn't really considered an imperialist power. And a lot of countries wanted the U.S. to maybe help them decolonialize, but the U.S. had a very wishy-washy policy on decolonialism at this point.
Yes.
Because a lot of its European allies, which they wanted to keep in NATO, like for example France,
Philippines and
Philippines they has independence at this point.
Okay.
But the U.S. had allies in Europe who had colonies, and the U.S. couldn't press too much because they needed them as allies against the Soviet Union or North Korea or whoever it might be. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. is very wishy-washy on colonialism. It seems the U.S. could have gone, but chose not to. So that means China's the big dog at the conference, China and India, because the U.S. and the Soviet Union aren't there. Interestingly, the U.S. did send one representative, and he wasn't there officially, but Jet and Ebony magazine, which are two African-American lifestyle magazines in the U.S. at the time, sponsored his trip. Oh. so he could go to the Bandung conference, and he gave like a speech and stuff. I realized it was a little unclear here while I was editing, and it's not just a representative that went to the conference from the United States, but a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, and it was Adam Clayton Powell Jr. And another thing I should have mentioned is that the KMT tried to assassinate Zhou Enlai on the way to the conference by blowing up his plane. But, hey, we all forget things sometimes.
Okay.
So China was the guiding force of the conference, and so they sent their big guns, who is Zhou Enlai in this case, to represent them and give the big speech.
Yeah.
So Zhou Enlai, second-hand guy to Mao.
Yeah.
He's the kind of carrot to Mao's stick on the world stage.
Yes. He's the diplomat.
He's the diplomat
of the PRC.
Yes. And he's a very good diplomat.
He is.
So I'm going to read a little bit of his speech that he gave to the Bandung conference. We Asian and African countries need to cooperate in the economic and cultural fields in order to facilitate the elimination of the economic and cultural backwardness caused by the long period of colonial exploitation and oppression. This cooperation should be based on equality and mutual benefit, with no conditions for privilege attached. Today, the peoples of Asia and Africa are increasingly taking their destiny into their own hands. We are convinced that with the advancements of industrialization of our countries and the raising of our people's standards of living, and with the elimination of artificial trade barriers placed between us from without, trade, intercourse, and economic cooperation among the Asian and African countries will become ever closer, and cultural interflow will be ever more frequent. By following the principles of mutual respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, non-aggression, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, the peaceful coexistence of countries with different social systems can be realized. When these principles are ensured of implementation, there is no reason why international disputes cannot be settled through negotiation. China's coming out as, we're cool. Yeah. We're reasonable.
Yeah.
We just want to help each other out.
Yeah.
It's like a support group of colonialism. We've all been hurt here.
Victims of colonialism.
Yeah. And we just need to help each other out.
Okay. So sounds all good on paper.
And this made China very attractive to countries seeking independence or countries seeking aid, because China again claims, we're not going to try and take over parts of your country or, build a factory and then we own it, or, we're just here to help.
Yeah.
Okay. This is 1955's China, at least on paper. So as more and more countries in Africa gained independence over the ensuing decades, China would pivot more and more towards Africa. And despite Zhou Enlai's lofty language, not all its goals would be so beneficial. We're going to start with one country today, and we'll see if people listen to these. I'll do more.
Okay.
But we're going to start off with the first country that President Xi Jinping visited when he went to Africa.
Okay.
Which is one of the countries...
When he was the president?
Yeah.
When he became the leader of China? Okay.
2013 or 2012.
Okay. And that country is?
Tanzania.
Wow.
Because it became independent fairly early. It's been friendly with China the entire time.
Okay.
And there's never really been any big diplomatic rifts.
Oh, really? What did they do about Taiwan?
They just ignored Taiwan.
Did they ever have a...
No, they never have recognized Taiwan.
Okay. Then they didn't have to...
No, they didn't... So Tanzania...
To jump through that.
Well, yeah. We'll talk about... Didn't gain independence until 1961.
Oh, okay. So they perfectly avoided the situation of...
Yeah.
Do we
Which China do we be friends with?
Well, you have to denounce one China
Yeah.
first before you announce relationship with the other.
Exactly.
It's yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Tanzania. So I'm going to go
Okay.
a lot into the history of Tanzania because I don't want to just be like hot takes on what China's doing there.
This is a history podcast.
We got to set the stage.
Yeah, I gotta set the stage.
So
And this will be beneficial to me because I'll just put it out front. I don't really know much about Tanzania.
do you know where Tanzania is?
I know it's in Africa.
Okay, that's good. That's a good
Where
start.
in Africa? Not so sure. But I
Okay.
think maybe I will after this episode.
You will 100% know.
Yeah.
So Tanzania is located in the center of Africa's eastern coast. So
Okay.
if you think of Africa, you've got kind of the Sahara Desert in the middle.
Yeah.
You've got like Egypt and Libya and stuff at the top.
Yeah.
And then or near the top, and then on the right hand side, closer to India and China and stuff, you have the East Coast, and Tanzania is kind of smack dab in the middle of that.
Okay.
It's a large, geographically diverse nation of 61 million citizens, bordered by Kenya to the north and Mozambique to the south. It includes famous landmarks such as Mount Kilimanjaro, which is the largest mountain in Africa, and technically, well, it's the largest freestanding mountain in the world.
Oh wow.
So Mount Everest is on top of other mountains, right?
Not freestanding.
Not freestanding, like from
Gotcha.
the ground to the top. So it's the largest freestanding mountain in the world. It has the Serengeti National Park, which is a famous national park of Safari Park, and then Lake Victoria, which is I think one of the biggest landlocked lakes
Why is it called Lake Victoria?
because white people found it,
No.
Jerry. And it's surrounded by like 3 countries.
Uh-huh.
So if it's like one country's lake, they'd probably just rename it. But I
Yeah.
think because there's like 3 countries bordering it.
And it's like which one gets the rename?
Yeah,
and-
so I guess
yeah.
it's just called Lake Victoria.
Okay.
It's the source of the Nile, I believe. The Nile River comes from Lake Victoria.
Okay.
Modern Tanzania is in most ways a manufactured concept. The land we know now as Tanzania, which also includes the island of Zanzibar, was originally populated by a number of African tribes of various sizes and organizational levels. These tribes farmed, raised cattle, worked iron, and traded gold, ivory, and slaves, along with other items, to Arabic traders on the coast. However, in the 1880s, the German East Africa Company began to expand into the region, building roads, railways, plantations, and mines into the interior. This soon failed when the Arabic traders, originally from Oman, and Swahili tribes united, killing any company officials they could get their hands on. Tanzania, it really is only Tanzania because at some point some Europeans drew lines on the map about who gets what part of Africa.
Right.
But once you do that, an identity does start to develop.
Usually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, look at the Middle East. It's
well, the thing
it's
is, though,
not a rare story of
the thing is
yeah.
with the Middle East, though, then
Yeah.
this is, I think, kind of an interesting example, Tanzania. So
Mm-hmm.
the Middle East, you have kingdoms, you have empires, you have very strong ethnic groups, very large, strong ethnic groups, and the British or other people just drew lines through them.
Yeah.
Like, but Tanzania,
Yeah.
we're talking about the tribes are not that large, and they're
Okay.
not that, there's no giant empires.
Okay.
It's
So
not
are
like
you saying because of the lack of powerful empires, kingdoms, there
Yeah.
was less conflict after the lines were drawn?
basically, yeah, because people just kind of intermingled and tribes intermingled. It wasn't
They
like
weren't enemies. They weren't.
no,
Right.
yeah, and there's
Okay.
other parts in Africa that do have that problem.
Okay.
You have big kingdoms and empires and stuff in Africa, and that after colonialism, maybe they put up with each other during colonialism, but now that it's over, now they want to have beefs. But Tanzania, it just was seemingly never that strong, these groups.
Okay.
But they didn't like the Germans coming in and causing problems, so they had a rebellion.
Can't imagine why. but yeah.
They pushed out the German East Africa Company.
Okay.
It was called the Shiri Uprising. So Germany sent in an army, put it down, and now it is German East Africa. So it's an official colony.
It's Germany's Africa.
Yeah, German East Africa.
Okay.
So this included mainland Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda, and part of modern-day Mozambique.
Okay.
It didn't include Zanzibar, though, which is this big island off the coast, because Zanzibar was technically controlled by the Sultan, and he had a deal with the British Empire. So Zanzibar is going to come into the story later, but currently it's not part of this
Tanzania,
colony.
okay.
Yeah. So it actually was called, at this point, just the land part of Tanzania is called Tanganyika,
Okay.
which is, I think, from some Swahili word for like sail, or it's some sort of, it's from a Swahili word.
Okay.
Now it's a official German colony. This was a large amount of territory, 3 times the size of Germany. And the German...
Good for Germany.
What was that?
I said good for Germany.
I know, right?
Sarcastically.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, there's going to be a lot of wars in the next coming up in European history, because Germany feels like they don't have enough space. So the German imperial administration either lacked the skill or opportunity to play various factions against each other like the British did. So the British, very famously, they go into a place.
Yeah.
They figure out which tribes don't like each other. They pick some tribes or kingdoms or ethnic groups or whatever, and they support them.
Yeah.
And then they have allies against the rest of the country, so they don't have to do everything themselves.
Yes.
Tanzania was so decentralized, the Germans couldn't really do this.
Okay.
So really, anything that they want to do, they have, modern-wise, they have to do themselves. Everybody's got different strategies for exploiting Africa.
Yeah.
Some countries are like, oh, you build factories and you build mines. Some countries are like, oh, we build plantations and you get them to work on the plantations. Some are like, we just move there and we start farms. White people move there and we start farms, and we
some just give them loans and start a One Belt One Road program.
Oh, we're going to talk about One Belt One Road, sure.
Okay.
Tanzania, they tried a little bit of each, German, East Africa.
Okay.
And what they ended up kind of deciding on was like, well, it costs money to send German settlers here.
Okay.
Factories cost money, and we have lots of factories in Germany. All we really want is raw materials. But what's free? We'll just have areas of the country, and we'll just tell every Tanzanian person, we'll either give them a tax, or we'll say, you have to plant like an acre of cotton. And then we at least know there's going to be cotton, and then we can build like a factory to export the cotton or whatever.
Okay.
This caused lots of rebellions because, these tribal peoples or these rural peoples, they don't want to be told what to do by the German colonial administration. They might not even really fully agree that they're part of a colony.
Right. Just because they say so, it doesn't mean it's true to them. Yeah.
So the largest of which, the Majimaji Uprising in 1905, would leave several 100,000 dead. The German colonial forces just started burning crops, and there was like a famine, and so it was bad.
Yeah.
So it was bad times. Despite all this, though, a national identity began to form, both in service of and opposition to the colonial regime. Schools opened as Africans were trained to take over mid-level administration posts in the growing towns, plantations, and other businesses. Through the selection of Swahili as the official language of instruction, this created a common tongue by which increasing numbers of Tanzanians could speak and communicate. So now you don't just have a bunch of tribal languages. Now you have kind of a tongue where most Tanzanians, or upper class, because it'd be like leaders and stuff, could communicate.
Right.
The British Empire.
Okay.
When they take over Tanzania, which they're going to soon, they kind of stop this, or they slow it down, because they just recruit these people from India. The British Empire is very much a tiered system of racism. Yeah. Where, they have India as a colony, but then if they need administrators in Africa, they'll bring
people from India.
From India.
Yeah.
But Germany didn't have anywhere else to train these kind of administrators.
No.
And it was too expensive to bring them off to Germany. And so almost inadvertently, they started creating a literate, educated kind of professional class in Tanzania.
Of the Tanzanian people.
Which was not tied to any particular tribe. Yeah. Or ethnic group, which is going to become increasingly important as we get on towards independence.
Yeah.
So the UK would continue this trend under its exploitation of Tanzania, and it would eventually emerge today as the official national language. And now actually Swahili is kind of the common tongue of all of East Africa. From South Africa up to like Kenya, it's commonly spoken, and different countries can talk to each other through it. After the First World War, the British were given Tanganyika as a protectorate. The United Nations gave it to them. Yeah. And, supposedly on paper, all these protectorates, it's like, oh, you're supposed to just shepherd them until they're ready to be independent. Yeah. And really, it's just a colony. You know, they had no plans to get them ready for independence. No.
They have no incentives.
No incentive. The British, if anything, spent even less time and money attempting to develop Tanzania. Cash-strapped and flush with other colonies, they felt no need to expand in Africa, as they viewed an educated African professional class as a threat, especially when they had access to a large pool of Indian talent to be used instead, as we discussed.
Yeah.
So they continued to discourage industry, viewing the colony as a source of raw materials and not much else. Despite this, some Africans did manage to claw their way into an education in Tanganyika. And one, Julius Nyerere, made it to the University of Edinburgh before returning to start Tanganyika's first African political party, the Tanganyika African National Union, or TANU. There were Christian schools and missionary schools and also Muslim schools in Tanganyika outside of the traditional educational system, and some students would get grants to study abroad. And Nyerere was one of those guys, went to the University of Edinburgh, came back. But anyway, so he founded the first political party. It was quickly suppressed by the local colonial governors.
Of course.
But it allied with workers' unions and consumers in a series of strikes. Now, this is very urban, these strikes, because, again, Tanganyika, huge place, and then there's cities on the coast and there's some distribution centers. But because of that, the economy could be crippled with some very small strikes. It's not like there's 50 docks in the country. There's like one set of docks, right? So if those dock workers strike, it's a big deal.
Okay.
Britain eventually basically determined that they could not profitably hold the colony with these strikes. And in 1961, the process of separation began, concluding in complete independence in 1963.
Okay.
They looked at it, and again, because Tanzania, the politics of it were so decentralized, it wasn't like they could ally with one group or the other to try and get back control of the country. The TANU, the Tanzanian African National Union, wasn't based on existing tribal ties, as far as I'm aware.
Right.
It was just Tanzanians.
Just the people.
Yes. So, despite its extreme poverty at the time, Tanzania had several advantages moving into independence. Nyerere was inheriting a functional government, even though it was a colonial government, and had ongoing support from the British. This wasn't a coup or a revolution.
Okay.
So he also had international recognition. It wasn't like a rogue state or something.
Right.
Tanzania lacked long-standing large tribal conflicts, which might drive wedges into the new territory. And there were no great populations of rich white settlers, factory owners, or other interest groups which could challenge him early on.
Like South Africa.
Yes, right, or Rhodesia, which is, what became Rhodesia. It's now Zimbabwe. But anyway, so yeah, it's kind of a blank slate. So there were, however, some great challenges. Educated foreign administrators and professionals were gradually leaving the country, and after decades of poor education investment by the British, there was few Africans to fill them. So this new nation had to quickly train up enough professionals to keep the current system from falling apart, improve it, increase its food supply, industry, transportation, and standards of living, all while managing the expectation of its citizens. Just on a tangent here, it's really hard if you're a emerging colony, because not only, even for Tanzania, which was kind of a peaceful split, because you have all these people who expect life will dramatically get better for them now that the colony is gone, but not necessarily in the short term, because
things don't just run themselves.
Yeah. And even some of these colonies were run at a loss.
Right.
So now, your country has to figure it all out. And Tanzania in particular, it's so decentralized, which is going to become a problem that Nyerere is going to have to figure out, and China's going to get involved. Because you can basically just go out into Tanzania in many places, and you have a couple cows, you build a hut out of mud, you grow cassava, which are basically like African potatoes. Okay. And you don't need any industry, you don't need any infrastructure. Okay. You don't even need a road. People can just live out there. And so
without a government, without an urban structure.
Yeah. And it's not just like a technological level. You look at China. China has had wet rice agriculture for thousands of years. And as we talked about before, that's not a system that's like an individual system, right? You need kingdoms, you need empires to handle the rivers, the flooding, the dams, or it breaks down. Yeah. You can't just do it on your own.
No.
And that for thousands of years has created highly organized societies there because to manage this complex series of agriculture. Yeah. And Tanzania is just
no need for that.
as far away as you can get from it. Or
Okay.
Tanganyika at this point is about as far away you can get from that without getting to like hunter-gatherer.
Right.
It's very, very decentralized. And some people will say like, oh, that's good. They're living on the land. But
Yeah.
most people, including Nyeri, who's, the president now,
Mm-hmm.
thinks it's bad, right? Or that it needs to be improved, that, we need to have food security, we need to have medicine, we need to have transportation, we need to have education.
Yeah.
And those things cost money, and those things require
Industries
organization and
organizations
industry and
roads
centralization and all that.
infrastructure. Yeah.
And for the past like 40 years under the British, none of that had really been getting done.
Mm.
So,
Given
given
they kept them poor in a way.
Oh yeah, 100%. They
kept them just not developed so that they can extract raw resources out of them.
No, 100%. And reading about the history of it, the British were very kind of upfront in their internal communications. That's like, oh, if we let a professional, educated African class develop here,
Yeah.
it's, you know what I mean? It's going to be a political threat to us.
Yeah.
And so they tried to stop it. And that's partially why, most of the businesses and professionals in the cities were I mean, it says Asian in the history, but they mean Indian. They mean like India, from the colony of India.
Yeah. I mean, people are Asian people.
I know.
We got it,
But in the U.S., we don't really, I don't know. It's kind of a UK American divide that in the U.S., Asian means East Asian.
Usually, yeah.
Usually in the U.K., it means all of Asia.
Yeah. Can I just, on a side note, you said that the British, they were pretty upfront in their internal communication about this.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes when you read some of these stuff,
yeah,
especially like maybe what the UK said about, India and all their colonies, and you're like, you're just putting this on paper? Like,
well, hey,
But hey, it was 100 years ago. It was 150 years ago. It
sure,
was okay to put that down on paper.
There's no wokifying having a colony.
No.
When something is called the colony of whatever.
Yeah. But it was a glorified thing to do to colonize. It means you're powerful. It's a positive thing.
I mean, that's basically. I mean, you look at Japan in Asia. In I guess not this time period, but during the early 1900s.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, you're either a colony or you're a colonizer. So we're going to be a colonizer, right?
Yeah.
We need to get some colonies. And
yeah.
No, so it's there's no sugarcoating it.
No.
So fortunately, given the relatively cordial independence process, foreign aid was rather plentiful, with the top three donors being the US, the UK, and West Germany. Within a few years of independence, though, crisis had erupted, with all three jeopardizing their main sources of foreign aid. So,
what crisis?
And this is going to obviously, Big Brother China might step in.
Yeah.
First for the
Chinese brothers.
Yes. So for West Germany, I think is the most amusing to me.
Yeah.
So Zanzibar is an island off the coast. There's another island called Pemba, which is in the same sphere of influence.
Okay.
And that has traditionally been controlled by Arabic traders from Oman. And that was a British protectorate. But it had its own revolution, an actual kind of bloody one, in 1964. So a year or so after Tanzania got independence. And that possibly China was involved. There was some kind of...
Possibly.
There was some Chinese agents involved. They formed a revolutionary council.
Okay.
And when they declared independence, they were immediately recognized by the whole communist crew. So like Soviet Union, North Korea, China, all that kind of stuff. And Western nations did not immediately recognize them because it was like a bloody coup that took over the island.
Well, which we don't see anything wrong with that.
No, exactly, right? That's just the workers rising up. So
it's called, what's the phrase? Revolution is not a dinner party.
No, it's not a dinner party, Cherry. Power comes from the barrel of a gun.
Yes.
And so this is an island of several 100,000 people. So it's not a small area.
It's pretty extensive, yeah.
Then Nyeri talked to the guy who eventually became the president, and they formed a union, which became now Tanzania.
So they're one country.
They're one country, two systems.
So hey, that's good because we've been talking for a while about
Zanzibar.
Things non-Chinese.
Non-Chinese.
So let's
well, the revolution in Zanzibar was probably Chinese. China was involved, but it's hard to tell. But anyway, and do you know what?
China was not publicly involved.
No, not necessarily.
Not officially involved.
So do you know where the name Tanzania comes from?
No.
So it's Tanganyika
Yes.
and Zanzibar. So it's Tanzania.
Okay, that's cute.
Is it cute? Okay,
Yeah.
so anyway, though, the problem with this was that West Germany had a strict policy of having no diplomatic relations to countries that recognized East Germany.
Oh my
because
God.
they viewed it as it's one
So
country.
it's just like China and Taiwan today.
Just like China and Taiwan. And even though Nairi and Tanganyika never recognized East Germany, Zanzibar had before it became part of Tanzania.
Oh my God.
And so they got grandfathered in. And West Germany was mad at them.
You want to explain the grandfathered in like as a phrase? Because I don't know if it.
Oh, it just means
I
that
didn't
like
know what that meant. Yeah.
Tanzania as a united country inherited some of the diplomatic relations of Zanzibar when it had been an independent state for like 6 months.
Yeah.
And because of that technicality,
Yeah.
West Germany was mad at them.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't give them aid.
Yeah.
So that's one down. 2 down is
Have they tried? No, I was
what were you gonna say?
I was in East Germany and West Germany. Have they tried one Germany?
2 systems?
One Germany, two systems.
Well, they did for about 50 years.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a bad joke.
So,
Yeah.
and then the U.S. is the weirder one. So basically, there was a conspiracy theory that the CIA was planning to assassinate Nairi.
Why?
Well, we're going to talk about it, but he's a socialist. He's a socialist president. Tanzania is a socialist country. And so...
I sometimes forget that CIA is all over the world doing like all this crazy shit all the time, actually.
Obviously, they were doing a lot of stuff back then.
Yeah.
But even back then, there were conspiracy theories about the CIA. And there were some like letters, some forged letters saying that the CIA wanted to kill him. And Nairi publicized them and made a big deal about them. But
they were forged?
Well, I mean, the U.S. didn't kill Nairi and they gave him a lot of aid. So, I mean, maybe he uncovered the plot. Who knows? But basically, the U.S. It made relations with the U.S. frosty for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Because it's like accusing them of trying to assassinate him.
Well, I mean, if I learn anything from Narcos, the Netflix show.
Us just assume the CIA is going to assassinate you.
Yeah, no, is that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing a lot of times, and the CIA and the, what's the drug, the DEA?
DEA.
Yeah, they often have opposite goals, and they have to have infight. So I mean, it's
yeah.
I mean, I'm not here to say if it's possible that they did want to assassinate Nairi, but
I don't know either, but
but that was the plot line that Nairi had published.
Yes,
and
it made things frosty.
Publicized, sorry. Yeah. And
then the last was that, so the UK still was involved in Tanzania. And actually, shortly after independence in 1964, the Tanzanian military had a mutiny. And, there was almost a coup. And Nairi asked Britain or the UK for assistance, and they sent an aircraft carrier and they sent commandos, and they stood down. And I don't even think anybody died, but basically after that, Tanzania disbanded their military, and they created a new military called the Tanzanian People's Defense Force, I think, which was actually trained by Canadians and the Chinese, which again we'll get into. As a civilian force completely under the control of the government.
Okay.
Which, is not necessarily the standard in Africa for a lot of militaries. They can kind of be a power to their own. So, but they rebuilt it from the ground up to be loyal to, the elected government.
But then China and Canada was working together.
China and Canada were working together. But in any case, the problem was, though, around this time period, Rhodesia declared independence as an independent country because they saw countries like Tanzania being, achieving independence. And there was lots of white settlers in Rhodesia, which again, Tanzania didn't necessarily have this problem to the same extent. There are lots of white settlers in Rhodesia, and they didn't want to be part of a black government, right?
Yeah.
And so they declared independence from the UK to try and head that off. And obviously, this was seen by many African countries in the area as a very provocative move.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's Africa, it belongs to African people. it's like a rogue state. And Nyeri particularly was very, very invested in African independence,
right,
in African nationalism. And he funded and helped rebels in various groups to try and free their own countries. But anyway, he got into a diplomatic tiff with the UK for not applying harsh enough sanctions and actions against Rhodesia when it declared independence.
Okay.
And now so UK is kind of no longer on the friends list.
Okay.
Tanzania. These aren't like officially like blacklisted, but it's just is serious diplomatic
things are
problems
tense
with all three.
Yeah. Okay.
So he needs another friend.
I guess here, what's in China?
So
my guess is,
which is a good match because Tanzania on paper is a socialist country. Nyeri is a socialist.
Same as China on paper, a socialist country. Good match.
So Nyeri wrote an essay called Ujamaa in 1962.
Okay.
Describing his view of socialism.
What does Ujamaa mean?
It's the Swahili word for like extended family, like brotherhood.
Oh,
kind of.
Okay.
So that's his view of socialism, and it doesn't really seem like he obviously knows Marx and he knows Maoist stuff. I mean, he would understand the theory.
He's familiar. Okay.
But he has his own view of what socialism should be like for Africa.
Okay.
His view is of voluntary cooperation and hospitality. So whereas Maoism is like permanent revolution and warfare, and Soviet Union is class struggle and bureaucracy. It's all very antagonistic, those systems. Nyeri's socialism is kind of like, can't we all just get along? Which, reading it feels a little bit optimistic.
Yeah.
As a socialist system.
Yeah.
But I guess I would rather have that than the, shooting people in the back of the head, socialism or communism of like, China, at this time. So he says there's no such thing as socialism without work. A society which fails to give its individuals the means to work, or having given them the means to work, prevents them from getting a fair share of the products of their own sweat and toil, needs putting right. Similarly, an individual who can work and is provided by society with the means to work, but does not do so, is equally wrong. He has no right to expect anything from society because he contributes nothing to society. So the use of the word worker in its specialized sense of employee as opposed to employer reflects a capitalist attitude of mind, which was introduced into Africa with the coming of colonialism and is totally foreign to our own way of thinking. In the old days, the African had never aspired to be the possession of personal wealth for the purpose of dominating any of his fellows. He had never had laborers or factory hands to do his work for him. But then came the foreign capitalists. They were wealthy, which is obviously not true, that statement. They were wealthy.
I was going to say, greediness is the human condition.
Yes, and obviously,
and capitalism obviously have
created that concept.
It didn't create that concept.
No, and there was African kingdoms, and there's large African tribes that dominate small African tribes, and there's people within a tribe who are going to have more or less stuff. And
yeah.
So, I mean, it's...
We can't pretend there was no suffering of greediness or...
No, but
or human evil before capitalism.
I know, but I like Nyeri, so let's give him the benefit of the doubt here.
Let's get through it.
So the capitalists they're wealthy, they're powerful, and the African naturally started wanting to be wealthy too. There is nothing wrong in our wanting to be wealthy, nor is it a bad thing for us to want to acquire the power which wealth brings with it. But it is most certainly wrong if we want the wealth and the power so we can dominate someone else. Unfortunately, there are some of us who have already learned to covet wealth for that purpose, and who would like to use the methods which the capitalist uses in acquiring it. This is to say, some of us would like to use or exploit our brothers for the purpose of building up our own personal power and prestige. This is completely foreign to us and is incompatible with the socialist society we want to build here. Our first step, therefore, must be to re-educate ourselves to regain our former attitude of mind. In our traditional African society, we were individuals within a community. We took care of the community, and the community took care of us. We neither needed nor wished to exploit our fellow men.
Okay.
So, a very warm and fuzzy view of socialism.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot gentler.
A lot gentler
than Maoism.
Yes.
At this time.
Yes, and he also is like,
yeah.
He has a line which I actually like, where he says. And, this is maybe going to sound a little champagne socialist, but he says, he said a millionaire can be a good socialist, but a socialist society should not produce millionaires. Somebody already is wealthy. There's no reason they can't work within the society and try and make it better.
No,
but
Mao's like, no, strip them of, take all their money.
But he's saying the goal should be a society that doesn't create new people like this, right?
Okay, so he's not going to go around. So this paper, basically, he's not going to go around and like do a land reform and shoot everyone who owns land. Or did he?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So
maybe Mao convinced him.
So there's been projects, there's been things going on this whole time in Tanzania.
Yeah. Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
No sisters mentioned.
No.
New China, women's rights up front, because we need women to be working.
Well, we're going to talk about, but
so fake women's rights.
Yeah. Because some of that Maoism is going to bleed over to Tanzania in the next decade. But
okay.
So there have been projects in Tanzania.
Okay.
There has been aid, but a lot of it has just not been going that well.
Yeah.
Or it's been going slow. And again, it's hard because, even if you have a plan of something as simple as like, oh, let's export corn, right? Mm-hmm. Then it's like, okay, you tell everybody to grow corn. You have a region and you say everybody has to grow corn now because we're going to spend money and get a loan to build a corn like mill factory, right?
Sure, yeah.
And it's like, we're not going to get the loan from like, I don't know, France or something to build the corn factory if no one's going to grow corn.
Yeah.
So you have to grow corn now, right? And then it's like, well, we need a road to get the corn to the port, right? And we need people to buy the corn.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if any step in that process goes wrong, the whole thing is wasted.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's other corn factories to send the corn to.
No.
Right? If there's a drought and that region doesn't have the corn, then it's like
no more corn.
No more corn. It's all been wasted.
Okay.
So every single step, you know what I mean, is so fraught with failure, even with like the best intentions.
That's why you have a planned economy and a planned economy only.
Yeah. Wow. So
I'm being sarcastic in this episode. Yeah.
Feeling slightly disillusioned, Nyeri visits Beijing in 1965.
Oh, okay.
And received a grand welcome.
Which year again?
1965.
Okay.
So we're not quite at the Cultural Revolution, but things are ramping up.
Yeah, things are ramping up.
He's shown model communes, mass crowds cheering for him.
Oh, I'm sure they rolled out the red carpets and showed him the best factories.
That's the only carpet they have, Jay. Okay.
No capitalist carpet.
Yeah.
Whatever color capitalist carpet.
Exactly. Jay. They've only got one color of carpet, okay? It's China 1965. So
okay.
He soon becomes a believer in Maoist-style social movements, and Chinese aid followed him back to Africa.
Yeah.
So China gave aid before this, but it's small things. You help build a factory here and there.
Yeah, because again, China just had so much wealth.
Yeah, exactly.
That we can't wait to give out, to our African brothers. Never mind people domestically or.
Well, Chinese manufacturing ended up being a good match for the country.
Okay.
Because Western manufacturing, a lot of it really values labor over capital. You assume the most expensive thing are the workers. So you build a factory and it tries to be as efficient and high skilled and low worker as possible, highest volume. And, the machines, once you buy them, you have them.
Right.
But in Africa, in Tanzania, where you have lots of people, but you don't have a lot of capital, that's not necessarily a good match, right?
No.
You don't need the most efficient machines.
No.
You need stuff that's cheap and high volume.
Yeah. And you just throw bodies at it.
Yeah. Again, this Chinese style manufacturing focused on low capital costs instead of low labor.
Yeah.
And China was going through the same thing, trying to industrialize in the 1960s. So despite their high use of labor, they often outperformed factories financed by other nations. Zhou Enlai outlined 8 points for Chinese aid during this period. And I'm going to talk about some of them real quick.
Okay.
So he says they need to have low capital and construction times so the results might be gained quickly.
Okay.
I mean, it's only like a 5-year plan, Sherry. You got to get it cracking.
Yeah.
No conditions or privileges, no sense of obligation.
No sense of obligation.
We're helping each other. You don't owe us anything.
Okay. It's too good to be true.
I know. It's meant to bolster self-dependency.
Okay.
China at this point is very big on self-reliance. You need to produce everything internally.
Yeah.
So factories to help produce basic necessities and so the country has to import less stuff. We will provide the highest quality goods and materials. will teach local staff any technical skills required so that they can keep things running after we leave.
Okay.
And Chinese personnel will have the same standard of living as local workers, which was a big sticking point with the West and with the Soviet Union, who are like, yeah, we'll help you build a dam, but like you got to build us a hotel.
Yeah.
And we need to have, this
these
much
are,
food.
These are technical specialists we're sending you. They deserve
the best.
The best treatment. Yeah.
And the China's like, well, we'll send them to live in a hut.
Well,
it's
we're
fine.
comrades.
Yeah, we're comrades.
Yeah. We're the people. We're of the people.
Exactly. So lots of money came in, lots of Chinese experts.
Okay.
Lots of stuff getting built. The largest of these projects is going to be the Great Uhuru Railway, also called the Tesaro Railway, which ran from the capital of Dar es Salaam to Zambia. Now, the initial impetus for this project was Zambia is landlocked in the middle of Africa, and at the time it was surrounded by either colonial powers or basically all of its major routes were, either colonies or like Rhodesia was to the north, South Africa's to the south.
Okay.
So Nyerere, as a African nationalist, he wanted to give a landline to Zambia so it could export stuff through another African country.
Okay.
And all of the Western banks and all of these the World Bank and stuff basically passed on the project. And China's like, we'll do it.
We'll pick it up.
And I think at the time it was the largest aid project China had ever done.
Oh.
They gave it as an interest-free loan. It was 1,162 miles of railway.
Oh, wow.
Through very rough terrain.
Okay.
It was several $100 million, over $1 billion today in money, which was a huge sum for China at the time.
Yeah.
Started in 1970, 25,000 Chinese and 50,000 Tanzanians were able to complete the line within 4 years.
Oh,
and
wow.
Trains were running by 1975. 19 tunnels were dug. Numerous stations were created along the route. And so committed were these Chinese workers to Maoist ideals, they even grew gardens along the route to supplement food.
I don't know if that's Maoist. That might just be Chinese.
They might just not have gotten enough food sent from China.
Yeah. I don't know. Chinese people like to grow
vegetables.
It's
true.
It's a thing. You're self-sufficient,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What has happened, Shay? When did you lose that?
I have.
What happened to your vegetable growing technique?
I started at the beginning of the pandemic, if you remember. I started a little vegetable garden on the balcony.
Did anything happen?
Not much, no. Don't know if I have the green finger. Anyways, back to Tanzania. Back to the project, the railway project.
So they built the railway. Big success. The financial technique they used, I feel like I don't know if this is common with other projects, but they basically, so you're building a railroad in Tanzania. You're going to need raw materials. Yeah. But you're also going to need imported from China, but you're also going to need to buy stuff in the country, right? You're going to need to hire labor. You're going to need to buy food, whatever, lumber, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So rather than just take money from China and buy the stuff in Tanzania, they had this interesting plan where Tanzanians went to China and there was this Canton trade fair, which I'm assuming other countries went to as well.
Okay.
Tanzanians could pick out goods.
Okay.
Like soap and, cloth and whatever else.
Okay.
And then they would sell that in Tanzania, and then they basically would get the Chinese stuff for free.
Okay.
And then they would sell it in Tanzania, and then they would use the money from the sales to finance the railway.
Okay.
And so what that did was it also kind of introduced Chinese products to Tanzania, which is actually something that continues to this day, as China's the biggest trade partner with Tanzania, has huge amounts of imports or exports to Tanzania. And I feel like this was a big start of it, of Tanzanians got used to seeing Chinese consumer products in stores because they were given to be sold to fund the railway.
So that was a pretty smart strategy then.
I think it was, actually. I bet Mao didn't think of that. I bet Mao had nothing to do with that. He probably argued against it.
Okay, you don't know that, but
I don't know
we're just guessing. But
so China also sent military aid and advisors. Again, Tanzania had to recreate its military.
Yeah.
So China sent they sent tanks, they sent airplanes and things, and this created alarm in the U.S. and the U.K. despite other nations such as Canada also providing such aid. The Tanzanian army would go on to use some of these techniques in their war against Uganda, which is going to happen later.
Why do they have a war against Uganda?
Uganda had a socialist president as well. There was a military coup against them.
Okay.
Nyerere was friends with the socialist president in Uganda who had gotten deposed.
Yeah.
But basically a right-wing guy took over the country.
Okay, so Tanzania had a war with the...
In Uganda, it was a chaos, and the Ugandan soldiers were like looting across the border.
Okay.
So Tanzania went in there, fought the military. Actually, Libya was involved on the Ugandan side. A young Gaddafi
My God. Okay.
was involved, and the Tanzanian army
Okay.
in their Chinese tanks defeated them.
Yeah.
Had elections and stuff, and Uganda kind of regained. And Uganda was messed up for a while after that. But
Okay.
anyway, the Tanzanian army did well.
Okay.
I have a quote from the New York Times in an article where the US, the UK, various people were complaining about Chinese influence. They were like, you're building this railroad, you're training their military. We don't like it. Western nations look upon the railroad as an interference by the East, Mr. Nyerere said. But we keep saying all we want is an outlet other than through people who do not regard us as human beings. So,
Yeah.
throwing it back at him. And also he said something like, there's like 300 Chinese in Tanzania at this point, and there's like 20,000 British people.
Yeah.
So it's like,
It's a bit hypocritical.
it's very hypocritical.
Yeah.
China's financing, helping with the military, helping with the economy. Nyerere, however, brought back more than financial aid from China. He also returned convinced more than ever that a socialist movement could work and that Tanzania's growth must not coincide with a growth in social inequality. So obviously, you're a post-colonial country. You can just go like, oh yeah, ExxonMobil, come in here and build a refinery. Oh, whoever, come in, build a mine.
Yeah.
Right? But then all you're really doing, it's not that much different than China, in the 1800s, where little pieces of it are getting bit off
Oh, yeah.
by people, and you kind of lose control of it. And then you have obviously interest groups. You have the very rich people profiting from these deals.
Yeah.
And and then so that you get a huge wealth disparity. And Nyerere did not want that. He did not want Tanzania to economically modernize at the cost of big inequality. So he went to China. He saw all the stuff, these little planned villages, the factories, the parades. He's like, this is great. He's like,
So we need the Chinese dream.
We need to do this.
Yeah.
So the two most obvious outgrowths of this belief, also, again, he was having tiffs with the US, the UK, and East and West Germany, which kind of limits your options a bit. The most two obvious outgrowths of this were the Arushanna Declaration and the Ujamaa movement, both in 1967. So the Arushanna Declaration contains various elements, talks about African unity and other things, but the main effect is economic. It reinforced socialism as the official system of Tanzania and outlawed any TANU member from holding stock, being involved with capitalism, holding a leadership position in a company, having a second job, or being a landlord. And the TANU was the only party allowed. Tanzania was a single party state. So,
Okay.
a little bit light on the democracy there, but
Yeah.
if you're a government official, civil servant, politician, you cannot be involved in business in any way. You can't profit from it because, again, you would just, a company would come in, you'd get a bunch of stock, you would become rich and
Yeah.
sell it part of the country.
Yeah.
This was followed by a spree of nationalizations as banks, factories, trade companies, transportation companies, and most other industries were brought under state control. A board of trade was created to control all imports and exports in order to protect native industries and control the currency. So, all incoming stuff had to be approved by a board. Exports were, controlled. So now we're in serious socialism.
Yeah.
So now we're getting to real socialism. Ujamaa was in some ways even more dramatic and perhaps more familiar to listeners. Villagers were encouraged and often forced to form communal production units. While Nyerere stressed that Ujamaa, again, this is like the concept of socialism,
Yeah.
it was meant to be voluntary, local administrators often forced the issue to meet quotas or to receive additional investment.
Yeah.
Nyerere himself went on long march-style journeys across Tanzania, and others emulated him, wearing pins of Mao and Nyerere together.
Okay.
Labor camps were established in rural areas. City youth were sent to work. College students were required to perform up to 5 years of compulsory state service after graduation. The focus was on self-reliance, with small cottage industries popping up everywhere,
Okay.
many of which were not useful or competitive. While there were some overeager youths who attacked selfish villagers and some anti-Ujamaa sentiment was penalized, things never reached the fever pitch of China's Cultural Revolution. So
I think rarely. I think that's the Cultural Revolution is the only Cultural Revolution there.
Yeah.
Hopefully. But
so the thing is with Nyeri, this is my own reading of him. I like Nyeri from reading what he's written. And he's just not like Mao, right?
Okay.
Mao is the kind of guy who will be like, well, if 10% of the people die to meet this production target, and we meet the production target, more people will be born next year.
Yeah.
And, we'll have the production.
Yeah. It's just numbers.
It's just numbers to him. And Nyeri is not this way, right?
Yeah.
So when things go bad, they're going to do famine relief, right? They'll jeopardize the production targets in order to like import grain or whatever it is they need to.
Yeah. If
there's like a famine or things are going on.
Mm.
So
much gentler hand from the state.
Much gentler hand from the state. It still does get a little crazy, and obviously they nationalize like everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it causes a lot of problems. Yeah, it's not quite as ruthless.
Okay.
So much like the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, these economic and social movements were largely destructive and did not realize the massive increases in production and happiness they promised.
Mm.
So yeah, within a couple of years, a lot of these communal living situations were shut down. Again, you have the problem with collectivization everywhere, which is like if you get a bunch of farmers together and you have communal fields and you have private fields, they're going to want to work on their private fields more. Right? No one is going to want to sacrifice because everybody feels like somebody else is being lazy.
Yeah.
And so it causes problems. Unless, of course, you just like force everybody to do it like at gunpoint, which is kind of the Maoist technique. And even that didn't last.
It's the labor
right?
camps, but yeah.
Even that really doesn't last.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah. What they do though, which is, I think, arguably whether this is even considered socialist, is they tried to centralize and create villages. So again, parts of Tanzania are so undeveloped that you don't even have like villages or towns. You just have individual households scattered across the landscape. And obviously, Nyeri's like, well, okay, we can't build. Where do we build a road to? Right? Where do we build a school? Right? Where do we build a clinic? So they basically, forced everybody to move into villages. Obviously, you think of like, oh well, like how are they going to just move their houses? And it's like, well, a lot of the houses are just built from mud bricks.
Right.
So it's not. It's not like you need a bunch of materials necessarily. You just have to force the people to do it.
Right.
And they can move. But yeah, so this is the process. But the Maoist stuff, the Ujamaa, it didn't really work. By the 1970s, it was fading out. Mao was fading out.
Yeah.
Now we're kind of back to nuts and bolts socialism.
Yeah. The fever's
dying
going down. Yeah.
Yeah. So by the mid-1970s, however, Western aid was once again flowing into the nation. Western institutions had found that it was politically useful to donate to a country that was on paper socialist.
Okay.
Nyeri also was adept at playing various international factions against each other and shaming whoever gave least. For example, he guilted the U.S. into financing a road to run along China's famous Tesaro Railway.
Wow, okay.
Though apparently the Chinese workers would get into fights with the Americans. There's actually an article in the New York Times about like these American like workers in Tanzania. And they're like, the Chinese workers kidnapped us in the middle of the night. And they like yelled at us about Mao for like, all night. And then they finally, they finally let us go. And the Tanzanians found out, it's the 1970s, people had a strong feeling.
Well, we were revolutioning over the world. Compared to Cultural Revolution, that was nothing.
Yeah. And so Nyeri can kind of dip into all three pots for Tanzania. He can get aid from the Soviet Union. Okay. He can get aid from China because, they're socialist brothers.
Right.
And he can get aid from the West because he's like, we're the cool socialists, right?
Yeah.
We're the reasonable socialists, right?
Well, that's smart of him then.
Yes. And he basically had this policy of non-alignment.
Okay.
Where he did not strongly associate. So he met Mao. He also met JFK, right? He met the Queen, right?
Yeah.
he's okay. And actually in this part, it's still, even today, Tanzania is still part of the Commonwealth of Nations with the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So, he's, they're betting on every horse.
He's got diplomatic talents then, too.
Yes. No, if there's one thing that Nyeri is like a genius at, it seems, I feel like it's diplomacy. It's, it's working the system. So China's influence began to lose its political character as well, moving towards businesses investing in the nation rather than straight aid and loans.
Okay.
So let's talk about today.
Okay.
So the Tesaro Railway is still in operation today.
Oh.
Mostly because of
hasn't been that long.
continued Chinese aid.
Yeah.
Much of the aid is either interest-free or has eventually been forgiven. Seen as the beacon of Chinese aid in Africa, it has been much propagandized over the decades. They seem unlikely to let it fail, despite its inability to turn a profit for various reasons. The railway, it works. It's a fine railway. But the problem is like, it just ends up being that the amount of cargo that ends up going over it from Zambia, it just cannot.
It's not enough.
Not enough to pay for the railway. And I think it's only a single line. So I guess, only so many trains can go on it.
Yeah.
And now with the rest of the countries around it being independent and not colonies, Zambia has
other channels.
Other channels to, to send stuff to.
But it's still running because you can't let it die.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, like,
for propaganda reasons.
Yeah, and I think even things like the One Belt, One Road, something like the Tesaro Railway is like the blueprint for it.
Yeah.
Way before any of this modern stuff. This is like, look, we built this railroad. It's a very impressive piece of infrastructure. It's still running after 50 years. That's the example. Also, so there's like, it's hard to find numbers, but there's probably like 20 to 30,000 Chinese living in Tanzania now. Lots of Chinese businesses, lots of Chinese construction, lots of Chinese investment in the country today. So let's talk about One Belt, One Road.
Okay.
Shiri. Obviously, this was a big plan.
Yeah.
When Xi Jinping visited Africa originally,
yes.
It was already kind of on the menu, or in his playbook when he visited Tanzania. And one of the linchpins of the entire One Belt, One Road was they were going to build a gigantic deep water harbor in Tanzania. And it was going to cost like over $10 billion. I think the loan was for $10 billion.
Okay, it's a lot of money.
And it was going to be like the biggest port, on all of East Africa. And this was going to be the kind of the way through which much of the other projects are going to be channeled, right?
You keep saying this was going to be.
So
did it come to be?
So obviously, there's been some problems with a lot of the One Belt, One Road projects.
Yeah.
To put it lightly. And quite a few countries have kind of realized that, like, this is maybe kind of a big contract we signed with China.
Yeah.
And a lot of these projects, some of them don't really turn a profit. And then, so anyway.
Lots of them don't turn a profit, I think.
Yes, lots of them don't.
But I mean, the profit is not the...
So my understanding of what happened was, so Kenya had some One Belt, One Road projects. And is it Kenya or Uganda? But countries around it. And they couldn't make some of their loans.
Okay.
And Tanzania realized, or it became public, that some of these projects or loans were backed by pieces of infrastructure in those countries.
Yeah.
Which, again, is no surprise to us today. But this is like 2017. Like, if you don't pay the loan, we get this port, or we get this airport, or we get this stretch of territory.
Yes.
Right? Or whatever we get. The loan with China for the port in Tanzania was like a 99-year lease. There was all this stuff. And Tanzania...
Can I just say 99-year lease?
I know, it's Hong Kong, right?
Yeah, it might as well be forever, as the British have famously said.
Yeah.
Which it turned out it wasn't, but it's a long time. It's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
And so Tanzania, basically, they had a negotiated. They sent back the contract, and they're like, we'll give you 30 years. And we want all this other stuff. Like, we want, you got to hire like a certain number of Tanzanians. They got to, a certain percentage of all the professionals have to be.
Okay. So they were
Tanzanian,
negotiating
all this stuff.
Yeah.
And China didn't do it. And then quietly, sometime in the last year, supposedly, the project has been canceled. So now, that the kind of the linchpin of it is not happening. And I feel like, Tanzania throughout its history has been smart enough to know how much is too much, like influence to trade for aid. Yeah. And they never really like kind of seemingly greedily go over the line and sell out a part of their sovereignty. Yeah. So don't get me wrong, Tanzania is a very, very poor country. Yeah. But never had a coup, independence, never had a civil war. Okay. They've had an unbroken string of elections. It's no longer a single-party state, though.
When did it become no longer a single-party state?
1995.
Huh. Young democracy.
But
yeah,
the same party always wins still. But
okay,
baby steps.
So this is like Taiwan before the 90s.
Well, I don't want to say.
Supposedly,
I looked up like the corruption index and the stability index, and Tanzania is like not that great on the corruption index.
Okay,
but it's not the worst. So
sure. But you're saying it could have been, compared to...
I think they've made a conscious decision over the decades.
Okay.
And I don't know if they still are, to not trade growth for instability. Which, so if it's like some big project, some bunch of factories, a bunch of investment, and it's going to create all sorts of issues, they just won't do it.
And when you say instability, you mean, in a way, maybe they're trying to avoid a civil war, but in another way, they might be avoiding the dethrone of their own power.
Oh yeah, of this political system.
Yeah.
Actually,
the dethrone of the government's power, not
yeah. And actually, right now, Tanzania has its first female president because the president of Tanzania died of a heart attack, and the vice president was late. So now she's in charge of Tanzania. But I don't know what the future of Tanzania and China will hold. It's a friendship. It's a long friendship since the beginning.
Yeah,
but it's also kind of a professional.
We're keeping keeping a safe distance.
Yeah,
right?
It's a cordial slightly
friendly.
distant friendship of like we're not going to go all in on this. And maybe that'll change, maybe it won't. But exports. I was looking at the export graph, and China's trade with Tanzania is huge between the two of them, and it seems to be only going up. So maybe they're going to be better friends in the future.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
Did Tanzania vote for the People's Republic of China to replace or, enter the UN, be officially recognized, and that's officially or unofficially, exiting the Republic of China?
Yeah, that's the impetus between a lot of this Chinese involvement in Africa, right? Yeah. Or at least part of it is the United Nations, there's only one seat on there for China. The Republic of China has it.
Yeah.
And which is, Taiwan today. And China needs enough votes, or the People's Republic of China needs enough votes to get the seat.
Yeah.
Now, the vote happened in 1971. Most of Africa ended up voting for China.
Yeah.
For People's Republic of China. And
was Tanzania one of them?
Tanzania was one of them.
Okay. So Zhou Enlai did his job.
Zhou Enlai did his job.
The carrot worked.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Tanzania is a good one to start with because it's a very non-controversial and in some ways positive relationship with China and Africa. Obviously, the Maoism caused some problems, but Nyeri kind of did that on his own. China didn't make them. China didn't make them do it.
Yeah. Well, he was influenced, but he had to want it.
Yes.
In a way, yeah.
He wanted to believe.
Yeah. No, they have agency. We're not saying that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I think if we get into some other countries, like Ghana and other places, it's gonna be quite a more tumultuous, volatile situation.
Okay.
Not in their relationship with China, which is going to remain strong for the most part, but in the things that China is going to influence people to do, or to train people to do, or to fund people.
You mean adopted Maoism or adopted social policies? And...
Yes, that kind of stuff.
Okay,
right?
All right. Well, that's interesting because I obviously,
So that's
African brothers coined term. It's just you always hear the stories and the rhetoric. And thank you for telling me about the behind of at least Tanzania, one country for now.
Yeah.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I know we mentioned the UN. I suspect we're gonna keep talking about this. Is gonna. I'm asking every episode. Did they vote? But it is in many ways a constructed propaganda that Africa had sent Republic of China to the UN because they're not the only ones who had voted for. They might have been quite a few of them.
Yeah.
But I believe at the time, in 1971, a lot of European countries, I think Canada voted.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just the whole socialist brothers, sisters thing.
No, I think it's
also about opening China up, and it's all about the market.
Yeah, I think with the UN, there's the realization that this body, this system isn't going to work if one of the largest countries of the world, we pretend it doesn't exist. And in order for the UN to be functional, we have to let the People's Republic of China be on the UN, because otherwise.
Well, I mean, I think
what's the
every
point?
country had their own reason for doing it.
I know, but
we're
it's
not summarizing for all of them.
I know, but
yeah,
I think that's the kind of
agree.
general
Consensus
gist
in a
of
way.
it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's even really the U.S.'s warming of relations with China in the 1970s.
Oh, I think U.S. was prepared for it.
Yeah. Even though the U.S. voted against it. Japan voted against it too. Interestingly, Japan was at the Bandung Conference in 1955.
Okay. Well, they're not a formally colonized country.
They were there.
Unless it's by their own, like...
And very diplomatically,
Yeah.
Zhou Enlai's like, we need to be friends with Japan as well.
Might be controversial of a statement.
I know.
Yeah.
But, they're trying to be friendly.
Yeah.
Let's let bygones be bygones.
Wow.
You had a beef with the Republic of China. We're the People's Republic of China. Japan, let's be friends.
In front of the common interest. We're all
Japan
friends.
Japan voted against it. Japan voted against the 1971 measure to let People's Republic of China in the UN. Anyway, so that was Tanzania. Theoretically, we might go through all of them. Hopefully, if there's any Tanzanian history experts out there, I didn't get it too wrong. I did read quite a lot. I tried to read Nair's essays on socialism and stuff to try and get a sense of it. But yeah, we've had quite a few new listeners, I think, over the past couple weeks, months. So if you recently started tuning into the podcast, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. Have a nice day.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.